here to present. Oh, you know what? I'm going to start that over again since it just started. Rewind. Okay. Hello. Thank you guys so much for coming tonight. My name is Stephanie Garner, and I am the Director of Parent Support and Education for Down Syndrome Indiana. We are so excited to have Jennie Dopp here from CaringTide doing a presentation on creating a life care plan. Their tomorrow starts with our choices today. And I think everyone on here is a parent, and I know this is so incredibly important, such an important topic. You guys are welcome to put questions in the chat box throughout the presentation, and Jennie's going to try and get to those as she presents, or we'll cover those at the end. You are also welcome to unmute at the end and ask any questions that you might have. If you have a question of a more personal nature, please keep in mind that we are recording this at the end of the presentation, that we will be stopping the recording. So if you want to save more personal questions until the recording is stopped, you are welcome to do so. So without further ado, Jennie, I will hand things over to you.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to be with you all tonight. And again, as Stephanie mentioned, I'm Jennie Dopp. I'm the COO and the Director of CaringTide, and we are a disability planning company. We help families all across the country plan for the future. And this is a personal and professional mission for me. I have 4 children, ages 19 through 28. I think she's 28. And my second child, Jackson, is there on the right-hand side in the gray sweater vest. And he has a dual diagnosis of autism as well as a rare chromosome duplication. And he was the first diagnosed in Utah and the 11th in the world with this chromosome duplication. It was right after they mapped the human genome. And so we finally had a name for all of the challenges that we were experiencing with Jackson. And then, of course, the autism diagnosis came a little bit later. But I tell you all of that because I didn't have a lovely organization like this to guide me. I really was on my own trying to find resources and training and information. And that put me onto my professional path for the past 16 years of working in the disability community. First as an executive director of a nonprofit, then building transition to adult curriculum, and now in my role with CaringTide. I am also a ChSNC. That means I'm a certified, a chartered special needs consultant, and I specialize in this type of planning. And it is really helpful because the systems that people with disabilities and their families have to navigate are complicated. And it's a new language. It's new acronyms, acronyms. It is a different system based upon where you live, whether it's your state or your county. You're trying to navigate a lot of personalities through maybe your IEP team, or just even trying to get connected to resources in the community. And that's why CaringTide exists. We bring all of it together. We are a holistic planning company where we look at all areas of life for the individual with a disability as well as for the family members. And we help people connect those dots. So many times I hear families say, I don't know what I don't know. So I've pushed this as far as I can, and I'm not sure what to do next. Or I've heard I need to do this next, but it's so overwhelming because I am just trying to navigate the day-to-day. And so I really need help finding my next right step. And that's what we do. We work with families all across the country. We're licensed in all 50 states. And our mission is to give every single family impacted by disability the opportunity for lifelong guided support. And of course, we work with people one-on-one as our clients, but we also partner with nonprofits around the country. And I teach about 1 or 2 of these webinars a week to try to get this information and these resources to family members so that they can do a self-assessment and say, okay, what's missing from my plan? Where do I feel stuck? Which part of the disability system do I not understand? Is it Social Security? Is it Medicaid? Is it Medicare? Is it my state waiver system? Is it an ABLE account? There's just so much, and that's why we want to show you how to put this very first step together. So one of the concerns that I hear a lot is who will care for my child if I can't? And it's not a matter of if I can't, it's a matter of when I can't. Just as I introduced Jackson to you tonight, my son with a disability, I'm going to use some personal examples throughout the presentation tonight to help paint a picture for some of the things that we've been through as a family, and maybe you'll be able to relate. When my husband was 46 years old, he was diagnosed with cancer and it was quite aggressive. And so we knew that he would probably pass away. And I was trying to wrap my head around, okay, how am I going to do this as a mom to four kids working, with a significantly less income than he was at the time? And the very first thing I thought about, and this sounds so awful, but once I processed his diagnosis and his mortality, I started thinking, okay, out of college, we bought this term life insurance policy. It's been about 20 years. Is it still in effect? And so isn't that awful that that's one of the first things you start to think about is the money and how you're going to pay for not only your family and your children, but specifically a child with significant needs and a disability. So maybe you're the same way. Maybe when you are first meeting with a planner like me, or even just taking this self-assessment tonight, you're thinking, okay, here are my questions. My child's about to turn 18. I have no idea where to start with Social Security. That sounds so overwhelming. Or I've heard about this waiver I'm supposed to get on with my state. I don't really understand what it is or what it does or why it's important. I hear this word special needs trust, but I don't really know how to set that up or why it's important. I just know I need one. So every single family is in a different spot, and that's what I do is I meet you where you are, and then we help you find your next right step. And we do that by putting together a life care plan. So, a life care plan is a coordinated strategy to incorporate your family goals, your child's individual goals, and a plan for achieving these desired successful outcomes with an eye planning for the individual with unique challenges. So, whenever we make a plan, we've got to have Jackson there at the center of the plan. And then, of course, we build out around it. But we don't want to do that without Jackson's input. We want to have him be able to tap into his own self-determination, determining the vision for his life, determining what he wants. And of course, he would love to play video games in the basement all day. We can't do that. So we've got to have that advocacy piece as a parent and be able to help him create the vision that he wants for his life. When I work with a family one-on-one, I go through 7 areas of planning. We call these the 7 foundations of planning. So again, I'm going to show all of these to you tonight because I want to teach you how to do this. And then if you get stuck or if you need more help or you want to work with a professional, then CaringTide is of course there to help guide you. So we'll go through these pretty quickly. We only have an hour. My biggest pet peeve with a webinar is that it's fluff and it's high level and I don't really get the nitty gritty. So tonight you're going to get that. You're going to get so much education. It will be really hard for you to take notes during this because we do have to move at a pretty quick pace. But like Stephanie mentioned, you will get this recording so that you can watch it back and you can go through these 7 areas, rewind, look at the bullet points that I list for you. And hopefully this will just start to pique your interest into how can you take your planning that you've done one step further than you have now. When you put a plan together, you obviously want to put your child at the center of the plan, but he or she can't be the only person because if you plan in a silo, you're going to miss something. So you really want to consider your other children. Now, I have 4 children total. Everything since Jackson has been born has been about and around Jackson, where we go on vacation, where we sit in the car, who has what place at the dinner table, if we can go to a loud place or not, what our social schedule looks like, how long we stay at a family party. So much of our life is about Jackson. But when we put a life care plan together for our family, we need to consider the needs of the other kids. Jackson's life has been pretty volatile as far as mental health concerns and navigating the day-to-day. He works full-time, well, almost full-time at McDonald's, and it's been a huge accomplishment for him to work at McDonald's. He just was made an assistant manager. So he's really, really worked hard. This has been almost a 10-year journey for him. But with that said, there can be times where emotionally he cannot regulate, and we are dealing with maybe a 3 to 5 year old from emotional regulation when he gets triggered. He's getting so much better about being able to self-regulate, but when there's a lot going on, or he's frustrated, or he feels like he's controlled, there is a lot of behavioral issues there. And so, because my 3 other typical children were raised in a home that was pretty volatile, and we, of course, were just doing the best we could with the skills we had at the time. And just everybody was kind of white knuckling it. these other children have a lot of anxiety and what's called CPTSD, or complex post-traumatic stress, from being raised with a volatile brother. And so we really want to make sure we're considering the needs of our other children. As we consider things like housing or what role of caregiving will our other children have once I've passed away, is that something that they want to take on? Is that something that they should take on? Is there funding dedicated for my other three children to be involved in Jackson's care? And as you're thinking about that yourself, you may be thinking, well, no, no, no. They've already done it as a sibling. They just want to be a sibling, a brother and a sister. They don't want to be involved in the day-to-day caregiving. Well, can they be a portion of the caregiving? Can they be the person that takes them places, but there's actually like a case manager person that's talking to Social Security, or that's like a guardian type role, not the legal guardian, but helping with the day-to-day care management. So think about your other children if you have more than one child, and think about what role will they have in this life care plan. And then, of course, the last piece would be the parents. I want you to think about this like when you get on the airplane. They tell you to put your own oxygen mask on first, and then after that, you can put the oxygen mask on your children. And that's because we as parents need to stay alive as long as possible. I want to live one day longer than Jackson, and that way I know that he's taken care of. But there's a lot of situations like my husband, and spoiler alert, he's still alive. The treatment plan worked for him and he still is with our family. But what if my husband had passed away? There's got to be enough resources available for my care as well as my three other children and Jackson. So let's think about this a different way. You have a cute neighbor down the street. She has a baby, or they have a baby, and the whole goal is to get that baby through high school, launching into college, and getting them self-sustained. And then you focus on yourself and your own self-development and retirement, and then you pass away. And that's the circle of life. Well, with our family, our journey started when Jackson was 5 months in utero, and I found brain structure anomalies with the ultrasound. So we started meeting with the perinatologist, and then he was born with emergency C-section. And 2 days out of the hospital, there were specialist appointments and surgeries and all of these different types of things, strapping him in the special education school bus when he was 3, really volatile period through elementary school with an IEP and trying to navigate being a partner in the IEP process. And then, of course, high school and fighting with the school again to try to get him retained for post-high services, and not really understanding as well as I could have that we have to count graduation credits in order to allow him a pathway into post-high. So as you can see, there's been all of these things that we've learned along our child's life. And then that school bus really stops coming at age 21, 22. And what do we do next? How do we make that transition into adulthood? And we're still focused on them throughout our efforts to work towards retirement, but we're still trying to figure out employment for them, job accommodations, Social Security, understanding things like VR. There's just all of this that happens. Here's another model to help you get thinking. This would be like a Dave Ramsey taught model, where you start to save some money, you pay off, or you build your emergency funds and save your first $500 or your first $1,000. And then you're building assets. You're hopefully putting some away for retirement. If you're really fortunate, you might even have some legacy funding that you can pass along to other people. Well, our family is different. We can't do it the same way as Dave Ramsey. We have to think about a life care plan. Is there any money coming from you to your child? Is there any money coming from your parents, the grandparents, to your child? I'll give you an example. My father-in-law has a beautiful little piece of property up in Idaho, right next to a river. And if he sells that piece of property and gives $10,000 to each of the grandchildren, and a check comes to our house in Jackson's name, that check will be an asset for Jackson. It's his money. It's first party money. It's in Jackson's name. And so as he goes to apply for Social Security and Medicaid, there's an asset check to see what assets are in that loved one's name. And they would see that $10,000 sitting in his checking account. So our families are different. We have to structure from a legal perspective where the assets flow, how the assets are going to get from Grandpa over to Jackson, and do it in an appropriate way. So I'm going to touch base on all of this tonight to give you some things to think about. I also want you to know that this is very complex, and tonight we're only giving you a high-level overview of these 7 areas of planning. If you ever want to go deeper into any of these topics, whether it's a financial strategy, ABLE accounts, Social Security and Medicaid, estate planning, you can go to our website, caringtide.com, and you can click on the workshop tab. And you'll see a list of all the workshops that we have coming up. There's like sibling support, ABLE accounts, all sorts of things, and you can register for one of those. So again, try not to feel too overwhelmed tonight. I know this is a lot, but I just want to show you all of the areas that we could consider for your plan. So as we think about that um, the legal management that you've got to put in place for your child, you can look to see how much things are going to cost. What about the letter of intent? What about the emergency plan? What about your family mission statement? How much will it cost for housing after you pass away for your loved one? What about that vacation? What about the health care? Will they be able to access Medicaid? So think about all of the different costs that are associated with your loved one's care, and that will get you started on the right track. Now, most families, your neighbor down the street is just planning for parents, for caregivers to get to the end of their life, and they're saving for their retirement. They're thinking about long-term health care and assisted living. Our families are different. We are actually planning for 3 or more streams of income. I'm thinking about me, I'm thinking about my husband, and I'm thinking about Jackson. And I've got to get 3 people to the end of their life and consider all of their needs. So from a financial perspective, this is a math equation that we can help you solve. We have software that we can plug in and we can say, okay, this is the estimated net worth of your portfolio. Your child is or is not getting Social Security. And we'll go through all of the costs that I've given you examples of tonight and factor those in and add in inflation. And we'll get a number of how much we think it will cost to get your child to the end of their life based upon their disability, their health, your situation with your employment and your health. And then we can figure out a strategy of how to fund it. Because when you first hear the number, it could be anywhere from $1 to $2 million. And again, we have to take into account whether or not they have things like Medicaid or Social Security. But there's strategies to help you with this. There's about 5 different ways we can fix that math problem for you so that we can identify a strategy to help fund the Special Needs Trust. So I'll touch on that tonight as well. Okay, so let's get started. Now that you feel like, oh my gosh, there's so much, let's actually dig into the nitty-gritty and give you some ideas of things you can say. Can I check this off my list? The first one is the emergency plan. Do you have something written out that's in your cupboard or, with your nanny or with the family members? If something happened to you, what would happen in the first 24 to 48 hours? Does everyone know where the pharmacy is? Do they all know who the specialists are? Do they know what the dosage is on the medication? What do they need to know in that first 24 to 48 hours? The second thing, a letter of intent. Sometimes it's called an LOI. This would be downloading your brain as a caregiver or as a parent. What does the next caregiver need to know? Are there behaviors? If Jackson rages, what does the next caregiver need to know to bring him down into a more regulated state? If I don't document that process for the next caregiver, then they're going to try to approach Jackson and he will be raging and it's only just going to get worse. They have to know the systems and the processes we have in place. Or they may need to know he loves the blue plate. Everything should be on the blue plate for Jackson. What is it that's special about your family dynamic that the next caregiver needs to know? So here's some ideas. Document what your vision is for independence. Where are the financial resources? Do you have life insurance? Make sure and document that. What about Jackson's quality of life? What does that mean for your family? We live close to the desert, and so we don't have a lot of water by us. So a beach vacation is really important for Jackson each year. We love to go to the beach. It's his chill place where he can just sit with his toes in the sand and do his thing. Well, do I have enough money set aside for that beach vacation to continue every year for Jackson? With his autism, his superpower is politics. So he's always on his phone. He's following what's happening with the government. He's, trying to understand what's going on in Iran. He needs Wi-Fi. He needs a computer. He needs a phone. Now that's first world benefits. Obviously, those are not required for a good life, but for Jackson's quality of life, you bet. Those are things that I would want to provide for financially. What about if my sister, who's the next caregiver, doesn't like him working at McDonald's? She would rather have him be in an office. Well, she doesn't understand all the work that has gone into getting him this position as an assistant manager at McDonald's. And so I need to communicate all of that. Now, a couple of things you should know. A letter of intent is not necessarily legally binding, but it is very helpful for the next caregiver to not have to recreate the will. Again, try to capture not just like bullet point information, capture information that is really going to guide the next caregiver on caring for your child. Another tool that you can have to get organized and to document is something called a medical care notebook. So you can use this in a couple of ways. You can use it for yourself to track specialists, doctor's appointments, dosage on medication. What are the protocols for the G tube or for the epilepsy or whatever it is that you're navigating? That's one way because you want to pass all of that down to the next caregiver. The second way is to give Jackson a medical care notebook. This could be a simple binder, or this could be something he could have digitally on his phone, but it helps to have him learn how to track his own medication, his own specialists, and learn empowerment and autonomy and self-determination with his the medical piece that he has to navigate with his life. Okay, foundation 3, we jump into benefit access. So examples of public benefits would be things like Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, or SNAP. Those things are very basic. There's not a lot of money there. It's just to cover the basics for life. So as we think about that phone, that beach vacation, anything extra, on the right-hand side, you'll see the private sources of funding. So things like an ABLE account, which we'll talk about tonight, the funding that I'm putting in Jackson's special needs trust. What about the funding we provide to him privately or that he earns through his job? You can see everything on the right-hand side is what's going to supplement the basics that you get from Social Security, Medicaid, or Medicare, or SNAP. But not everybody's going to qualify for those things on the left-hand side. You have to meet eligibility requirements. And if you're earning too much money, you're going to lose those benefits. So you also have to understand benefit navigation and making sure that you understand the thresholds to stay under so that you can keep your benefits. One of the benefits we want to touch briefly on tonight is SSI. And the main thing that I want you to remember about SSI is the number $2,000. When you apply for SSI, you do not want to have more than $2,000 in your child's name. And you're thinking, oh, good, they only have $50 in a bank account from their birthday money. But you're not telling me about the stocks or the bonds that are also in their name that grandma might have put into their name, or money that's coming to them if they're 17 and grandma passes away when they're 17 and a half, and all of a sudden $20,000 shows up at your house. You've got to take care of that before you apply for Social Security. And there's ways that we can shelter that, which I'll show you in just a moment. You also have to meet Medicaid's eligibility requirements for Social Security. So a lot of times we'll do that with a genetic diagnosis as well as a neuropsych evaluation. And for our clients, we have an entire Social Security application guide that we build for you based upon your child's neuropsych and also understanding how to go through the Social Security application. So don't let this overwhelm you. There is help out there. For this population, I really want to emphasize two things. One is your genetic report. If you only have a FISH report, that probably is not going to be sufficient with the Social Security application. For Down syndrome, you really want to show a karyotype genetic report because it's more definitive for Social Security's criteria. They want to make sure that it's traditional Down syndrome and with trisomy 21 and not mosaic. You could still get Social Security with mosaic Down syndrome, but you have other criteria that you've got to meet. So go through your files if you haven't applied for Social Security and get that karyotype report from your geneticist if you don't have it already in your big binder of documents that I'm sure each of you have. The second thing that you might want to consider having is a neuropsych evaluation, a neurological psychological evaluation. There's two sides to a neuropsych evaluation. One is the cognitive side that could be like a WISC evaluation or Woodcock-Johnson or Weschler. There's lots of different types of tests that show the cognitive side. And we are looking at that composite score, but we're also looking at the scores that are the subcategories and seeing where the child falls from a cognitive perspective. However, we don't just base Social Security on the cognitive scores alone. What we really want to see too is the other side to the neuropsych evaluation, which is called the adaptive scores. That could be the Vineland score report, or it could be the ABAS. There's all of these adaptive scores, and what it does is we take both sides of the neuropsych and we blend it together to paint a really great picture of what life is really like for this individual. Sometimes with Down syndrome, it's a little bit easier to get the Social Security put into place. But if I have anybody on the call tonight who has a diagnosis of autism or 22q deletion or something where it's not a little bit more clear cut, not only do we pull in that genetic report, but we're also pulling in different aspects of the documentation that you can provide to meet this Medicaid's definition of eligibility. Now, the most we can get with Social Security is about $994. And so if you're in a state that gives you a little bit of a stipend on top of that, it could be a little bit more. But what we want to do is understand that that's the starting point. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get that money in the Social Security representative payee account each month. We're going to take out some fair share, which is kind of like rent, but we call it fair share so that it's not taxable income. We can use that for household expenses, or we can push that back to the ABLE account, or if we have a standalone trust, we can push it over to the standalone special needs trust. And I'm going to go over all of that in just a little bit. But that's how we use this Social Security money, is we take a little bit out for fair share so that they can pay their fair share for living with us. And if we don't charge that fair share, we're going to get less money in this account each month. So if you're only getting $500 or $600 in this account each month, you're probably not charging the fair share. And I can help you learn how to do that. The next thing that you want to understand is the timing of when to apply. If your child is younger than 18 years old, your income still matters. And so if your income is too high, your child will not get Social Security. But once your child turns 18, then they can apply for SSI on their own merit to their own assets, and your assets are not counted. So most of our children will qualify for SSI once our loved one turns 18. The other thing that you should know is once you are qualified for SSI, you can apply for Medicaid health care as well, or you can do the Medicaid health care first and the SSI second. Some states, they even have it in tandem. So once the SSI is approved, the Medicaid will come too. So every state's a little bit different. And I should say tonight, I'm giving very general information. Of course, there's so many scenarios that could apply. And that's why I like to work with people one-on-one to figure out where they're at and which piece of the puzzle is missing for them. The second program that I want to mention that's tied to Social Security is something called SSDI. Now, there's several ways to get this. Jackson started working when he was about 15 and paying into FICA with his paychecks. And so over the years, the FICA, the work credits have built. And once he applied for SSI, they actually said, oh, you have so many work credits from working that you will not go on SSI. You will actually start on SSDI because of his work credits. And again, you earn the work credits based on how much you are paying into FICA. That's the first way to get SSDI. If your child is on SSI and they've been working, they could get a letter that says, we're switching you over to the SSDI program because you have enough work credits. SSDI is great because you earn more money on SSDI. You can earn more money. It's based on how much you've paid in to FICA. And the other piece to it is you no longer have to stay under that $2,000 threshold. You are allowed to have assets on the SSDI program. However, here's a little asterisk. There's a caveat to that. People hear that and they think, great, I don't have to track the money anymore. We can have assets. But their child has a Medicaid waiver through their state, or their child has Medicaid health care. That is a different program. Medicaid's a different program than SSDI. There are thresholds of staying under a certain asset level on Medicaid. So be sure you're aware of which programs your child is a part of and what is the financial threshold for all of their programs so that you don't go over and end up losing a benefit. The next way that you could gain access to SSDI is through your own work credits as a parent. So once you retire and you start drawing your own Social Security, I'll use my husband. Let's say his Social Security benefit each month is going to be $4,000. So when my husband starts drawing his Social Security, Jackson can receive up to half of that, which would be $2,000. And then when my husband passes away, Jackson could receive up to 75% of what my husband was receiving. So that's the second way, is once you retire, there could be a shift for your child. Or if, let's say, you're on a pension and you don't really get that much Social Security once you retire, then it's possible for your child to stay on SSI plus still get a little bit of SSDI on top of it based on what your projections were. So again, very general information tonight. It really depends on your situation. I would need to sit down with you and look at what your Social Security projections are to give you a better idea of what will happen. The next way you could get SSDI is if you, let's say you're 35 and you become disabled yourself and your child is younger than 18, you might be able to access SSDI through your own disability. The other thing that you should know about the medical side of this is, okay, your child's been on SSI. All of a sudden they're switching over to SSDI because of the work credits. They had Medicaid health care, but once they're on SSDI for 24 months, that Medicaid will switch to Medicare. And this is important to know. Medicare is a great program too, but it's important to know because of your providers. You got to make sure that your providers will say the same if that's a big deal to you. Okay, let's talk about Medicaid. Again, I teach an entire class just on these topics. So go to our website, caringtide.com, click on the workshop tab if you want to go deeper into these topics. So think of Medicaid like a house. There's a front door, there's a back door, there's a lot of ways to get in. Every state has their Medicaid funding that they have to work with, and that goes into, for just to simplify this, a really complicated system into really simple terms that for the unhoused population. And then the two that are important to us are Medicaid health care, which covers the medical side of things, and the other one is a Medicaid HCBS waiver. So an HCBS waiver stands for Home and Community-Based Services. Every single state has their own waiver system. So the Medicaid health care is for medical care. The Medicaid HCBS waiver would be for supports, things like day programs, employment supports, coming in and helping with hygiene or grocery shopping, maybe a host home of where they live. Medicaid is not Medicare. Those are different programs and different eligibility requirements. The thing that I want you to understand with the home and community-based waivers is that it's important to get on the wait list for services early. So you would just Google your state, HCBS, home and community-based waivers, and you would be able to find your access point if you're not already on the wait list for your state. We've been on the wait list for over 14 years, and so it's really important to get on. If you're in a state like California, you just need to contact that center. It's called the regional center in that state in California, and you would go right into services with the regional center. So traditionally, if you're in what we call politically a blue state, you probably have better access to services than I do living in a red state. So be aware of how your waiver system works. Typically, there could be access points depending upon how significant your medical needs are or how much care, if 24/7 care is required. So again, different eligibility points, different waivers, and we could dig into your state's waiver with you. The next piece that we want to talk about is foundation 4, and this is the legal foundation. So as you're working with an attorney, sometimes there are forms, legal forms online you can use. Because of the nature of the complexity of our families, I don't recommend forms like that. I recommend working with an actual attorney in your state because you want your documents drafted by your state's laws. Typically, it's called an estate attorney or an elder law attorney, and we want somebody who has a lot of experience building estate plans for people with disabilities. Everybody has a neighbor or a brother-in-law who's an attorney, but they're not all created equal when it comes to disability planning. You've got to make sure that the attorney understands how to set this up for special needs trusts so that the money does not land in Jackson's name. And I'm going to show you why in just a minute. But let's give you some basics. You want an estate plan. The reason why you want an estate plan is to not only reduce taxes and fees, but to avoid something called probate. So if you only have a will and your estate or your portfolio is a high dollar amount or whatever your state's probate threshold is, then your estate would have to go through this probate process in order to have the estate funneled out to all of your beneficiaries. But if you have what's called a trust, a revocable trust, then it avoids probate. So you don't have to go through that costly process and time-consuming process. So that's the benefit of having an estate plan. The other thing that we want you to understand is if you have a will or a trust, it will allow you to divide your assets out in the way that you want it to go. So let's say you really want to leave 10,000 to your church or 10,000 to Aunt Sarah. If you don't have these tools put into place, your children or your posterity or your beneficiaries won't know your wishes, and it will just be kind of a free-for-all, and a lot of personalities and feelings come out when things are not written out clearly. So it really provides a very nice and smooth asset distribution and allows you to have some charitable gifting too. At a bare minimum, you need to have a HIPAA release or an ROI, a release of information for your loved one. This should be with the clinics, with the doctors, with your insurance company, because at the age of 18, you as a parent, even though your child has an intellectual developmental disability, will be locked out of their EMR, their electronic medical record. In some states, this happens earlier for certain areas. So in some states at age 13, 14, 15, 16, parents can be locked out of things that have to do with mental health or gender identity or intimacy issues or birth control. So you want to make sure that you're ready if your state has a law that's going to preclude you from accessing their medical information before 18. And then, of course, at 18, that age of majority, when they become their own adult guardian, you've got to be ready. What level of support does your child need? Do they need guardianship? Is there a large portfolio where they might need financial conservatorship as well? Is their cognitive level or their ability to make decisions such that only supported decision making should be used? Or should we get a limited or full guardianship and then use supported decision making with it? Or should we use power of attorney? There's two types, again, of power of attorney, and this is general information. It's called different things in different states. But I have a springing power of attorney for my husband. If he becomes incapacitated, then the power of attorney that I have for him will spring into effect. If I had a power of attorney for Jackson, I would want a durable power of attorney, one that's in effect the day that he signs it. The key to a power of attorney, though, for it to really be legally supported would be that Jackson has to understand what he's signing. He has to understand that he's making me his agent, that I would be able to make decisions for him in the areas that he outlines. So it's not across the board. It has to say, Mom, I'll let you make decisions for finances, medical, housing, education. It has to be spelled out in the power of attorney, and Jackson has to understand what he's signing. So a lot of times when I'm working with families who are impacted with Down syndrome, with children that have Down syndrome, we'll kind of go through the neuropsych. We'll kind of see where their executive function is doing great and where they actually need some more support. Because what your neighbor is doing is probably different than what you may need to do. So even though supported decision making is awesome and I love it, and it can be a legal alternative to guardianship in a lot of cases, guardianship is the most supportive. We're always shooting for high expectations. We want individuality, autonomy, employment, independence. But what we're doing with these supports that I'm talking about right now is we're building in the safety net. Just because I have guardianship doesn't mean I have to use it. It just means it's there if I need it or if somebody is taking advantage of Jackson financially. But maybe I can come down here and only do a financial power of attorney because I know that the situation is pretty controlled. Jackson tells me when things are happening. I don't think he would let someone take advantage of him. So you've got to decide somewhere on this trajectory of building in safety and support versus always working towards a high level of independence. You're going to end up somewhere on this trajectory. You can always course correct. If you get guardianship and you're just like, I want him to be his own guardian, you can always have that dissolved. If you start at power of attorney and you're like, you know what, this isn't working out. That happened to my friend with her daughter recently. She had power of attorney for years and years for financial and medical. And recently she was hospitalized for about a 2-week time period. And they really ran into some problems in the hospital where she needed medical guardianship of her daughter in order to navigate that medical system. So we don't know all the time, just know it's not a one and done. I know it's a very tender process that you go through because you're like, I don't want to strip rights from my child. Just know that depending, say, I only want guardianship over medical and financial. Or maybe you want, can you guys still hear me okay, Claudia? Can you give me the thumbs up? Okay, I had a little note that said I am losing connection. So just know this can be adjusted and changed. Moving on, because we have a lot to cover, with a will, that's great. That's a bare minimum to have a will so that you can have everything allocated. You can even say in the will, hey, after I pass away, I want a special needs trust created for Jackson. So that would be that very first bullet there, a testamentary trust, where it's created with a will, and the will says, create the special needs trust after I die. The problem with that is that does not necessarily help you avoid probate. Again, I want you to work with an attorney in your state to understand what that probate threshold is for you, but at bare minimum, you would want a will. A better option is, of course, that revocable trust. The other situation with a will is that special needs trust that's created after you die can't be funded until you die. So let's say grandma wants to leave 20,000 inside of that trust that will be created. She can't do that because you're still alive. So think about the flow of money from grandparents, from aunts and uncles, brothers and sisters. Who's going to help fund the trust? When is the money coming? Where will the money sit and be collected? And where will it wait for the child to use it? So we've got to think about those things. With the word special needs trust, um, let's see, I was just looking at a comment. I'm going to come back to that, Ben, because that's a very good question. With a special needs trust, we throw around that word in this community like it means the same thing. It doesn't. A special needs trust is a mechanism that will help our child save money and stay eligible for Medicaid and Social Security. But there's different types. The first type is a first party special needs trust. If Jackson gets that payout from grandpa's Idaho property, it comes to our house in Jackson's name, and the only place it could go would be an ABLE account, which we'll talk about, or a first party trust because it's Jackson's money. The problem with a first party trust is when Jackson passes away, if your state has what's called a Medicaid payback, Medicaid estate recovery, Medicaid clawback, what will happen is the money in that first party trust gets frozen. The state will come back and claw back the Medicaid premiums and the cost of the Medicaid that they spent on the loved one, and then it's released to you so that you can pay for the funeral and settle the child's estate. So there is a great way to use the first party trust. It's just not what we're talking about tonight. What we're talking about tonight is a third party special needs trust. Sometimes it's called a third party supplemental needs trust. So I have a revocable trust here for me and for my husband, Ryan. And all of our assets get loaded into this revocable trust. So like the deed to our home, the grand piano, my wedding ring, all the assets that we have would get loaded into this revocable trust. We each also have a will because we're our own people. And maybe I want to give some money to my sister, and maybe he wants to give money to his sister. So the wills are different than the trust. The will's talking about the way things are distributed, but the trust is for our joint assets up here loaded together. Ryan will probably pass away first, and then after I pass away, that's when this trust will get executed. The assets that we deem for our three typical children will flow down to the three typical children. Jackson's piece for us is this number one. A special needs trust will get created for him, and his 25% or whatever we're putting into his trust will get created and funded at that time. There's no other money coming from inheritance for him. The only money coming to him from us will be after we die. So in our situation, this is the way we're choosing to go. However, I have a client, they have a revocable trust. They set it up the same way to go into the special needs trust when they die. The problem is, grandpa has money and he wants to leave money to the child. So they have two choices. They can either update their documents to say, I want to create a standalone trust. Here's our trust over here. I'm going to create a standalone for Jackson, and grandpa can then name the standalone trust, and grandpa's money can go into that today. It's open for business today. If they keep it the way that they have it, then there's no trust because both parents are still alive when grandpa dies. So you got to think about again the flow of money. When is the money going in there? The other thing that they could do is keep it exactly the same, their revocable trust. The special needs trust gets created after they die, and grandpa has to switch up his own plan. He's got to change his estate plan and create that standalone trust for that child through his estate planning over here. So again, this can get complicated, but it's not rocket science. Just work with an attorney, disclose where the assets are, disclose where the money's coming from, disclose when what you want to have happen, but just make sure that somehow that special needs trust is created. Because what we want to do is dump all of Jackson's money into that special needs trust so that Social Security and Medicaid do not look at it. A Social Security, Medicaid don't look at an ABLE, and they don't look at a third-party special needs trust. And also, there's no Medicaid payback on that trust I'm creating or the grandpa's creating. There's no Medicaid payback on that. Those assets are kept for Jackson. If Jackson passes away, I would have beneficiaries on those accounts and it would come back into the family and get distributed to our three kids. One other thing I want to talk about is a pooled trust. So sometimes I work with families where the child with Down syndrome is the only child. There's no nieces and nephews, cousins. There's really not somebody who could be a financial fiduciary, somebody who's going to invest Jackson's money, who's going to file the taxes on the trust. So sometimes people like the idea of a pooled trust, and it's where Jackson would have his little account number with all of his money inside a bigger pool of trusts. So everybody has their little accounts. The ARC or the nonprofit or the organization that's managing this pool of money invests all that money together. They file the taxes on the trust and they take care of everything. The trick to the pooled trust is that you have to check on the beneficiary. If Jackson were to pass away, what would happen? Would the money that is left inside of his little account go to the organization to benefit other people? Or would his money come back out to the family and be distributed down to other beneficiaries in our family? So again, there's lots of options. There's lots of different types of trusts. I've listed some of them there. Irrevocable means once I pass away, Jackson's Special Needs Trust is irrevocable. It can't be changed. Revocable means my revocable trust. It can be changed at any time while I'm still alive, but once I die, it's irrevocable. So again, just some vocabulary words here. I can help you through this process. I can help you find an attorney in your state that is in your budget. There's lots of different training that we can do around this. The other thing I want you to know is you've got to communicate with your family and just say, look, I don't expect you to give any money to Jackson. We have a template that we give to our clients so that they can use it, but it will just basically say, I don't expect you to give Jackson anything, but if you do, please make sure his ABLE account is named. This is the account number, or you can name the standalone third-party special needs trust. We talked a little bit about the money that's inside of the trust and trying to figure out that math equation. How much do you need? You can't possibly, I mean, I have probably one or two clients that have maybe 15 or $20 million portfolios that can totally take care of the trust just with their own assets. Most of us, average people, it's going to take a couple of different funding streams in order to fund that trust. So again, we want to take into account, does your child get SSI, Medicaid, Medicare, SSDI? What will they get from a public benefit standpoint? Private assets will be whatever I have left over after retirement and I pass away in order to go down to my other kids and to Jackson. But one thing that I am doing is I want to preserve my retirement for me and for Ryan, my husband. And then after we both pass away, whatever's left over from our good times through retirement will get passed down to our three other children. There's not going to be enough there to pass to my three other kids and also fund Jackson because, again, we don't have any benefits. He makes too much money now for SSDI, and we sit on a Medicaid wait list, so we don't access anything on the public from the public sector there. So what we're doing is something that's called a second to die life insurance policy or a survivorship policy. And it's a cheaper policy because it has both parents on it. And it will say after both parents have died, this policy will drop right into Jackson's Special Needs Trust. And again, I'm only going to buy enough life insurance that I know I need from my math equation that I was solving as I went through and I calculated housing, medical, beach vacation, cell phone. What is that number? And I factored in inflation and I factored in all of the financial figures that I need to account for. I have my number and then I buy a policy that will fund his trust outright. That's an easy way to do it so you're not stressed over here with mom and dad trying to save every single penny for the special needs trust. Or maybe you want to buy a policy that's half of the amount you need because you know when you die, your portfolio is pretty good size and there'll be the other half that's required that can come from your assets. So again, you can fractionalize this and pull in lots of other sources. Your church community, your extended family, ABLE accounts, what are all of those different tools? The other thing that you can do with life insurance is you want to make sure you coordinate it with your attorney and help your attorney understand everything you have at play. You want to tell them about the policies, make sure the beneficiaries are titled correctly. Here's a homework assignment. All of you check your beneficiaries on your retirement accounts and all of your insurance policies. You better not be naming your kids. What you want to do is name your spouse or your partner for the first beneficiary, and after that, name your trust because the trust is going to do the work of dispersing the money and making sure Jackson's piece gets into a special needs trust. When I was younger, I didn't know that. And so Ryan on his retirement accounts, which now we're older, so those are growing, I was named as the first beneficiary, and then each of our kids was named as 25%. Well, that's horrific because that 25% would have ended up in Jackson's name. So go through and change the beneficiaries once you have your estate planning done, so it will name the trust. Here's some basic types of insurance that you could possibly tap into to help you solve these issues. So your group policy, let's say you work at Walmart and you get $25,000 life insurance. It's so cheap, it's just like 10 bucks a month, get it. That's awesome. It'll supplement the other insurance that you need. The problem with group policies is if you leave Walmart, you lose that insurance policy in most cases. Term, that's what I had right out of college. It was that 20-year term. Now Ryan's had cancer, the 20 years has expired, and now we're trying to apply for new insurance right now in order to have that 20-year term converted. And it's more expensive because we're older. So try to get as long of a policy as you can based upon what you can afford with your budget. And then, of course, there's some whole and universal type policies there. And again, we can help you with this or you can work with your own person. But that survivorship policy, it's where it's a second to die survivorship policy. It funds the trust outright. The last thing I want to talk about is an ABLE account. We're coming up on the top of the hour. Again, I teach a whole class just on ABLEs. The basic gist of this is that it's a way to save money, especially if your child's getting SSI or they're working. because you have to keep their asset level probably below $2,000 for things like SSI, Medicaid healthcare, and that state Medicaid waiver in most cases. So again, I showed you my moving hands. Think of this Social Security money as a ping pong ball. You've got to ping pong ball it around. It's got to come out here from the Social Security account to you for fair share, push it back to the ABLE. You can take it from Social Security, push it right to the ABLE. If it comes, excuse me, if it comes out to you first, and then it's your money. And so that money can come over here and go to the special needs trust. So it's all about the flow of money, the rules that are allowed. You cannot take Social Security money and send it right over to the trust. It has to come out to you first. The other thing that you should know is if you have a 529, an UTMA, an UGMA, an ABLE account is a great receptacle for that. You can only put about 20,000 a year in an ABLE, so you got to be strategic. Every January that resets. Jackson's working, so he can add an additional 15,000 a year and change to the ABLE account. But if your child's on SSI, it caps out at 100,000 before their Social Security is paused. So just be aware of that. Again, here's another slide. You can come back and watch this and look at all of these bullets. Trying not to cough and have a cough attack tonight. So to wrap up, our mission is to give every single family impacted by disabilities the opportunity for support, either by working with us or through these educational webinars. We do give free consultations. If everything I said tonight totally goes over your head, please reach out. I'd be happy to help you and help you find your next right step, or say, you know what, you're good. You've done an awesome job. You have nothing left to do. And I hope that's the case for you. There was a question, at what age would you recommend to get the neuropsych? If your child is still in school, you can totally tap into that through your IEP team. They should be updating that every, three-ish years is when you can ask for that. If you haven't had one since sixth grade and your child is 17, ask for it. And right now it's April. If you wanted to try to get that done before the end of the school year, especially if your child's leaving the school system, ask for it today. Put it in writing, send it the request to the IEP team, and then they can get you on the calendar because it takes a while. They might have to push you off till fall, depending upon when your school year ends. But especially when your child is 17, make sure you have an updated neuropsych. You're going to want it for your SSI application. There's some states like California where they're like, oh, we don't do the neuropsych because of Down syndrome. It's fine. I would still want it. I would still want it because of the Social Security application, the vocational rehabilitation intake. If you haven't got on your state Medicaid waiver list, it's always great to have. Social Security loves to see it for Down syndrome if you're like 17 and now you're 22. As long as you're, close to 18, that will still probably work for you. But again, I want to look at your neuropsych and see, is it a full, complete neuropsych? Does it have the cognitive and does it have the adaptive side to it? That was the only question that I saw. So I can stay on for like 5 more minutes if anybody wants to unmute and have a little Q&A. I'm happy to do that. I know it's a ton of information, you guys. Watch this back and we'll see if you still have questions, you can reach out.
Jennie, I just wanted to say thank you so much. This has been a really wonderful piece of information. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now so that if anybody does want to come off mute and ask a question, you're welcome to.